Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 324 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 324 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. We've got a great episode for you this week. We're going to look at some more 2023 projections. We've got George Springer, the enigma that is Jose Berrios, Erik Swanson, and of course, Jordan Romano. And all of this and a whole lot more inside episode 324. Thanks for joining us, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We're deeply appreciative of all the following and the watching and the subscribing and all of that stuff. So thank you very much. I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFTC. Like I said, we've got a great episode for you, and helping me get through all of it is the host of the On Feck Circle Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's Steve Feck. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Shaun. There's no buffer between you and I this week. Karen down there doing some scouting down at Dunedin and all, so we can't rely on her voice of reason to keep this from spiraling out of control. So now again, we warn you in advance it's going to happen. So just get settled down there, folks. It's going to be.
That's right. Karen is on location, which means we just get to do our thing without the presence, the professionalism that Karen brings every week. So anyway, welcome to everybody. You're going to enjoy it regardless. Don't worry, Karen will be back with us. She's got her own show on Thursday, Sunny Side of the Dome, where she will be coming live from Dunedin, and it's going to be a good one, so don't miss that. And before we continue, I want to take a moment to remind you that the Jays from the Couch podcast is sponsored by BetStamp. It is the single greatest tool any bettor can use. Download the BetStamp app at the App Store, Google Play, using code JFTC, and you will find that you can line shop across all the sports books out there. Find the best bet for your money. As well, you can follow winning bettors, follow them, see what they're doing, what they're up to, and what makes them so successful. And hey, maybe you can try and do the same thing. Lots of great stuff from the BetStamp app. It is really a great tool for if you are looking to take your betting game to the next level. Download the BetStamp app, like I said, at App Store, Google Play, using the code JFTC, and you can start betting like a pro. All right, Steve, we're going to kick this episode off 324 episodes strong. We're going to kick it off with our MLB Minute, which is a regular feature here on the couch. And for those of you who are not familiar, let me just explain the rules so that you are up to speed. Basically, one topic from around baseball. We take 1 minute each. I've got my trusty timer on my phone ready to go. When that 1 minute expires, some funky music will play to let us know that we should probably stop talking. So it's a very quick, rapid-fire discussion, anything going on around Major League Baseball. And, of course, Steve, this week, we would be ridiculous. We wouldn't be worth the sound waves that we broadcast on if we didn't talk about the World Baseball Classic going on right now across multiple countries and capturing lots of attention and excitement and all of that stuff. So, Steve, let's get your early impressions on the World Baseball Classic here. You've got 1 minute to try and encapsulate all of your initial reactions to the WBC, and that begins now.
Well, the World Baseball Classic, I think, means more to the international fan base than it does to us here in North America. There's a lot of passion within those fan bases, a lot of pride. Certainly, we talk about that Dominican shortstop or the Puerto Rican, starting pitcher, or, the Japanese, cyborg, Otani. We always have those references to their country of origin, but really when they come to North America and play in Major League Baseball and in the minor leagues, it's more of a conglomeration. But for now, like for example, baseball fans in Italy, baseball fans in Australia, they've already advanced into the pool and they weren't expected to. Teams that you would think that would do well, like Korea, really, really struggled. And you got to see some glimpses of teams, the national team from mainland China, Taiwan, a lot of interesting team Israel, a lot of interesting outposts putting up good efforts here in the World Baseball Classic, and I think it's more fun for them than for us.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, in my 1 minute will start here in a second, and it's actually very similar. Excuse me. So here we go. WBC in 1 minute. I think actually, Steve, you hit it right on the head that it means far more to the international crowd, and I think that's probably one of the goals of this whole tournament is to expand the game of baseball across the globe. Which I think is kind of funny because it's actually far more popular than people realize. However, one thing that struck me was when Mexico upset the United States. Mark DeRosa had a very interesting comment in that you're managing the team to satisfy the big league clubs and their demands on their players. And so you'll never really have a true WBC. You'll really never truly have a real international tournament as long as that's the case. And I think that's the one thing that has to be sorted out if they're going to allow big league players to take part in these tournaments. They have to figure out that the big league clubs have to say hands off, right? And just, if you're going to play without the restrictions of essentially a company telling them how to play their players. And that's the one thing I think that they've struggled with right from the beginning, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, they're telling players how to play by legislating. Again, I love the pitch clock. I love the fact there's no shift, but all of these different rule changes they keep introducing to improve offense, to make the games, go faster, whatever it is. They're in essence, that's corporate telling the players and telling the managers how to play. You can't use innovation. The shift was innovative back when they started using it, with Ted Williams and players like that, where it made sense because Ted Williams just refused to hit the ball the other way. He could hit the ball anywhere he wanted to. He just refused to do it because he was Ted Williams. He goes, I can hit the ball and get on base no matter what it is. Then everybody had to use numbers and figure all of these calculations out. So in essence, it was kind of being mandated down that way. But when we talked about this earlier, my point was it should be minor league players. There should be nobody on 40-man roster should be playing in the World Baseball Classic, because what better development tool can you have for some of your better prospects that maybe aren't of age yet, or people that you want to figure out, okay, they're not on the 40-man, but do they really have a future? You put them in a high-stakes tournament like this, and I think it balances out because teams like Australia and teams like the European clubs, most of those players aren't even going to sniff professional baseball in North America. They're just not. You'll get the handful of them. It's really only Japan, Mexico, Central America, the Dominican Republic, South America. Those players, yeah, they're going to get in there. But if you're going to have minor league players come in, why not? So much for it being an MLB minute. But why not? Put these players under the gun right away, because it's one thing to have the tools, but you have to teach yourself how not to change your game in pressure situations.
Right, and who knows if that like how many players are doing that, how many players are told to do that, and so on and so on, right? Like that's the one thing. So are you are you really getting the best out of Jose Berrios? Clearly, after the other day, I would say maybe not. But for whatever reason, who knows? Got a couple of comments here. Dulcimeris watching on YouTube. John Axford chopped up the Great Britain hitters yesterday. So great to see. So great to see. And then, of course, the New Brunswick, Canada guy. Great Britain beating Colombia 7-4 in the seventh right now. The WBC has more upsets than March Madness. Yeah. And that's what makes it exciting. That's there's that element of it too, which, I think goes deeper, obviously, than professional sports. But Anyway, now we're going to get into our 2023 projections, and we've got a chock-a-block episode, if you will. Lots of good names to talk about here, and we're going to start with, I think, the guy who comes with the most obvious caveat, aside from Nate Pearson, I would say, the health caveat, and that is George Springer, who has yet to play a full season in a Blue Jays uniform, missing time due to injuries and so on. Last season, though, 133 games. And Steve, that's where we're going to start this discussion with regard to George Springer. And I want to ask you, health is obviously the first thing everybody thinks of, and it is the most important. But moving George Springer to right field, is that really going to impact his ability to stay healthy?
In theory, it does. But I think when you have a player with the built-in natural intensity that George Springer brings to every at bat and every fly ball, I don't think that there's a way that you can prevent injuries just by shifting him in positions. I will say I think it will keep his legs a little fresher, a little healthier. I mean, the turf now is better than it has been back in the days, of when the Jesse Barfields and Lloyd Mosby's patrolled exhibition stadium. They might as well have been playing in the parking lot for all the softness that turf really gave them. So, and that was very common then. I mean, the Expos started playing Andre Dawson a little bit more in right field toward the end of the season because his knees were just couldn't take the pounding, and it's a lot more outfield to have to patrol. So in theory, you're reducing the risk, but I don't think it's going to change the fact that George Springer is going to have an aggressive injury at some point during the course of the season. When you have
Mm-hmm.
that kind of player, it's going to happen, and you just
Yep.
have to build that into your plans, and that's why there's been so much talk about the fifth outfielder because
Mm-hmm.
when Springer and Kevin Kiermaier is ultimately going to get hurt at some point, you need to have that fifth outfielder who is now your fourth outfielder, to replace one of those guys that play so aggressively. So I would say you're reading a little bit too much into it. You're being safer. It's like adding the flaps to batting helmets. Okay, if you get hit in the head, okay, you're still facing serious injury, but even with the flap, but you're
Mm-hmm.
reducing the odds of having a truly serious head injury with the flap there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would compare moving Springer to right as having that batting helmet flap.
Right. At least it's not the pitching helmet, right? Because we should bring that back. The big old pillow on top of the head. No, when it comes to Springer, though, I remember in the past we've said I really don't have to do anything because the people watching our show or take the words right out of my mouth. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
New Brunswick, Canada guy, excuse me. There's still a wall for Springer to dive or into in right field, though, and that's the one thing that I kind of my head went to is if you're trying to keep him safe, you just given him an extra big obstacle in the way. Now, yes, you've moved him to right field and because the shift is limited, Bo Bichette won't be anywhere near him, so that's a good thing, obviously. But you've also put a massive wall right there, right? So that's the one thing that I immediately thought of. But I think that combine that with I read it the other day. I believe it was Shai Davidi at Sports, and it was talking about Kevin Kiermaier and how he kind of takes over an outfield, not just with his play, but how he actually literally takes over. Shouting, whose ball it is and that kind of thing. And he's got his own system that apparently works rather well and all of that stuff. And I think that'll go a long way to keeping George Springer healthy too. Just the ability to communicate in loud environments. Obviously, the end of the season is fresh in my mind. You can tell. But if he's healthy, so there's the thing, right? Like that's always the obvious caveat that comes with him. If he's healthy, obviously, all-star caliber player, no question about it. So, Steve, let's start with his offensive production. What is it? The one thing, like if you're looking to see if George Springer's had a good season, because he does a lot of things really well. He's got the power to hit home runs. He's got the extra base power, and he's, for lack of a better word, because I don't know how to quantify it, but he is a clutch player. He can come up with big hits in big situations. So when you look at how at the end of the season, I know the season hasn't even started yet, but what is it that you're looking for to say George Springer has had a good season? Aside from health, obviously.
Yeah, boy, the player with his talent, I think it's really hard to narrow it down to just one. But I mean, I would probably look at OPS because again, you've got your on base percentage factor in there. You do have the slugging factor in there. Um, he's capable of getting on base in the 380, 390 range. He truly is. I don't know that that will ever really happen again, for any players really. But I mean, he's capable of being in that on base percentage thing of 380, 390. And when you factor in the fact he's got the extra base power, I think that OPS number really no plus, just OPS. That's fine. You just need the actual what's actually happening on the field. We don't need to worry about what would happen, when Jupiter collides with Mars and all the other things happen. Just OPS. I think that's the number I look at for George Springer that tells me he is firing on all cylinders. I almost said run scored, but that's tough because I think that's more dependent on the situations of the hitters behind him. So I
Yeah.
want to go a little broader and go OPS.
Okay. So what's interesting to me, there's a couple of things that I look at. Obviously, I look at the kind of the back of the baseball card with the home runs and RBI and things like that, because it gives you a quick general idea. But 76 RBI for George Springer last year, that arguably low. Excuse me, but when you're hitting in the top spot of the order, you get the 8-9 guys, which is great for Kevin Kiermaier, who believes he's going to lead the league in hits from the 9 hole, which is great. Go ahead, let's put that down as your goal. I love it because that's only going to mean good things for George Springer and Bo Bichette, who will follow him. But I'm looking at things like on base percentage in particular. And you're right. He only had one season where he was above 380 on the on base percentage. That was 2019, where he was 383. And he put up 6 wins that season. But last year was a good season for him at 342 on base percentage, a 267 average, which is right around his career norm of 269. One thing that I found was he walked just a fraction less, but also struck out less than he normally does. So that's a little interesting, but also 14 stolen bases, which is interesting because that's the most he's stolen since 2015. And his speed, Steve, according to Fangraphs, his speed went from 4.6, 4.4, 4.7 in the previous 3 years, all the way up to 6. So he must have been feeling good, at least in the lower half, right? And so maybe that's a sign of things to come. When you're thinking about George Springer, though, how much, really, how much is speed going to play into his game?
Well, there's raw speed,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like the Vince Colemans of the world, or if you will, or Devon White, but Devon White was very, very fast, but he was an intelligent
Mm.
base runner. George Springer may be one of the most intelligent baseball players in Major League Baseball. And I know that that's tough to quantify to
Mm.
say, well, what do you mean? I mean, he just seems to, when you see him, of course, you won't be able to see him step out of the box too much now, but when he's outside, of the box before he steps in, you can see that he is thinking, on multiple dimensions there. It's like, okay, well, if I get a fastball, I can do this. If he tries to get that slider past me, I might want to hold off on that if it's not the locational one. You can just see that in his mind, and he reacts accordingly. So I think because he knows how to use his speed in the right situations,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes him that much more dangerous. I think the Blue Jays have a lot of base runners like that, even when they run themselves out of situation where they're overly aggressive. And admittedly, the Blue Jays have had their issues, running the bases
Mhm.
since really since 2019. It's been a problem overall, but I mean, I think it's a healthy aggressiveness. And George Springer is someone that knows, okay, okay, I have natural speed. I'm not going to outrun something, but I can pick the situation where I can get that extra step, whether it be on a fly ball, whether it be on the base, being able to then go from second, from first to third on a single. That's the kind of speed that George Springer has, but you can't quantify it because you can't really put it on a stopwatch. You literally have to watch games. Imagine that.
Mhm.
Actually watching games and coming up with information to talk about. But that's it. I mean, those are the situations and that's why George Springer always has had a better year at the end of the year than it seems he's having during the course of a season. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
postseason successes that he's had aside, really, a lot of times you say, "Boy, yes, he's a clutch hitter, but boy, he only had one hit today. Or he's only had two hits this series, or whatever." But in the aggregate, at the end of the year, George Springer has had a very productive season on so many levels across all of the important baseball categories.
Right, right. And Dulcimeris has got a good point here. Looking forward to seeing how many stolen bags he gets in 2023, as well as other Jays players. I mean, the shift, the bigger bases, the pitch clock, and all of that. I think there's going to be an increase in stolen bases across the league, but definitely in this lineup, I think you're going to see Bo Bichette collect a few more. You're going to see Kevin Biggio collect a few more. Whit Merrifield, if he can even get back to 30, that would be great. Let alone 40 or 40 plus. So there's a lot of potential for the bases to be stolen, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because I was trying to get to this comment as well, because it's going to be our next point. If Springer has good contact guys behind him, perhaps he'll do more hit and run plays. A player with a good batting average with balls in play stat behind him, something like that. So my question to you, Steve, is how much longer is George Springer going to be in that leadoff spot?
I have no problem keeping George Springer in the leadoff spot, even as he ages, even as he slows down. Dulcimeris made a great point. Is that okay? Bo Bichette makes good contact. The problem is you don't know what pitch he's going to swing at to make that contact. I mean, if he thinks somehow that a ball that's 3 inches off of the dirt that he can gulp it somehow, and he's good at reacting to to pitches that maybe it looks like he's fooled on, but he's good at making very quick with adjustments. I think that's what hinders a guy like Springer from maybe trying to run more when you have a guy like Bichette behind him.
Mm,
I mean, personally, though, it looks like they're not going to slide Bo down in the lineup. I think they're going to move Varsho down because I think he has much more power potential. But I would rather see a Dalton Varsho hit two than a Bo Bichette if you got a runner like Springer in the leadoff spot. And then once you get past that first inning, you've got Kiermaier down in the 9 hole. Again, Kiermaier's not going to steal a bunch of bases, but he's going to get that extra base on a base hit in the gap or a base hit that's not hit, on a rifle. So that base runner can't get a jump when you've got a guy like Bo Bichette who is such a free swinger.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the right answer is for that leadoff spot. I'm just the only thing I consider. I used to be like an on base guy, right? So for me, somebody who walks a lot, can work the count, that kind of thing. High on base percentage is somebody I wanted there. So there's a number of guys who you could. I used to think Kevin Biggio could be that guy. Um, But what I do like about George Springer in the leadoff spot is that it gives him more at bats than anybody else. More times at the plate, more times to do what he does best. And I think that's kind of really like there are dynamic hitters like Vladdy and Bo and so on and so on. But I would still rather see a more complete hitter, I guess, like George Springer in that leadoff spot, for guys like Kiermaier and Biggio and whoever whoever else is down there, because it could very well be the lineup is so long, Steve, that
Mhm.
it could be somebody like Alejandro Kirk. Like on any given day, depending on matchups and things like that, you don't be surprised if you see Alejandro Kirk in the bottom half of the order, or sorry, bottom third of the order, even Danny Jansen, bottom third of the order, just simply because of who's there, right? And it's a good problem to have, but it's an interesting one because I don't know that we've seen that kind of depth in the Blue Jays lineup for a long, long time. Um, Anyway, New Brunswick guy, New Brunswick, Canada guy. Got to get a comment in there because that, or a comma, excuse me. He has a comment. He should get a comma to help me from stuttering and stumbling over my words. Varsho and Witt and Kevin Kiermaier, 7 through 9 would be fun, and I wholeheartedly agree. That would be maybe the best bottom 3 in baseball. Like that's that's looking pretty good. So there's a lot that they could do with the lineup, and I know that versatility is something they had really put a lot of effort into this past winter to address. And so, congratulations, it's done. But we're talking about George Springer. I think you gotta leave him in that leadoff spot.
Mhm.
For especially for now. Yeah, there are going to be days where there's an off day or whatever have you, or you know something might come up, an injury. I didn't want to say it, but I'll just say it. So Bo Bichette might be somebody who they put in there, and Alejandro Kirk would be an interesting one, somebody who can really use the bat. You know,
I was just going to say that I think that is the most intriguing guy to hit in that 2 hole. And you're going to say, well, it slows down the running game. Well, if he's getting the guy from first to third or driving the guy in from second, then it doesn't really matter whether he's slowing down the running game. And I mean, it harkens me back to Thurman Munson. Thurman Munson, for me, had his most effective years when he was hitting in the 2 hole
mm-hmm.
for the Yankees back in the day, because he could use the bat. He was a great situational hitter. That's what you want in there between the top of the lineup guy and then your power alley guys. I know that New Brunswick guy had said Varsho 7. It's way down in the lineup. I think because of his skill set, I think you have to have him up a little bit higher because he's a 2020 guy, easy, hands down. If he gets
Mm-hmm.
the green light, he's a 2020 guy. So I'd like to see him up a little higher in the lineup. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
Kirk in the 2 hole with Springer on top, oh, that opens up all sorts of possibilities. Maybe drop Bo down to the 5th or the 6th slot, because then in essence, you almost have 2 leadoff hitters.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Springer, and I think Bo Bichette could be an interesting leadoff hitter as well, because he has all of the skill sets as far as being able to put the ball in play and all. I mean, so you would
Mm-hmm.
literally have 2 leadoff hitters, one in the at the top and one at the 5 or the 6 hole. So I mean, there's all kind of things you could do. That's where Don Mattingly is going to have a lot of influence on John Schneider, because I think John
Right.
Schneider thinks these things, and Don Mattingly is going to be able to tell him it's not that crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we got the numbers. I understand that. If you have an instinct, then that's what you do. And that's why Don Mattingly was such a great manager, both in the Dodgers and certainly with the Marlins. He just
Mm-hmm.
had a feel of putting a player in a lineup at a time when you don't understand why, or a place in
Yeah.
the lineup, and somehow with that matchup, it was very successful.
Yeah, I'll be interested, and I wish there was a way we could kind of be flies on the dugout wall to witness firsthand just how much of an impact Don Mattingly has, because that'll be probably the most underrated impact
Mhm.
all year, because we just won't know. But let's wrap up George Springer here with the most obvious. We're going to do our over under. Presented by BetStamp. George Springer has health issues. We know this. He's projected anywhere from 119 games to 138. Steve, I'm going to put the over, or set the over and under at 120. Does George Springer get into more or fewer games than 120?
Oh, that's an easy over. I mean, I think where he was last year, right around, was it 133? I believe you said he had last year. I think,
133.
yeah, I think that is the perfect number and the perfect amount of playing time. I think George Springer is, as players get older, I think they work harder at making their body more pliable, okay, more flexible, if you will. I think that's a lot more important as you age as an athlete. So I'm gonna say he's putting the work in. It's obvious, and I say it's well over 120. It's not even a discussion.
Interesting. Wow. See, listening to you, before that, I would have said the under just because I'm afraid to believe. But I think, listening to you, and I don't disagree. Like it's certainly possible, but I just have this feeling that I'm afraid to commit. So I am going to take the under, unfortunately, because my heart is winning today, and I'm afraid to believe that I'll see more of George Springer than that. However, if it is going to be under 120 games, I don't think it's going to be much. And I think everybody watching at home now is going with the over 120 games. And I hope to God I'm wrong. I really do, but I don't. I just have this nagging feeling, unfortunately. So I'm taking the under. It is what it is. I'm going to stand by it until I'm wrong, which on this one shouldn't take long. Let's do the over and under on when I'm wrong. I'll be wrong on the 120th game of the season. There you go. Um, anyway, don't forget, everybody, download the BetStamp app on the App Store, Google Play, using the code JFTC. Increase your knowledge, your access to betting tools using the BetStamp app. Download today using the code JFTC and start betting like a pro. All right, let's move right along to the mystery that is Jose Berrios, Steve, because I just don't know. We were actually kind of talking about him before we went on the air, and it seemed to me like does somebody go from where he was to where he is now, I guess, is the long and the short of it. So, see, before we even dive into numbers and all of that stuff, I know I was asked a lot over the offseason, Jose Berrios, Jose Berrios, Jose Berrios. So, Steve, whenever people talk to you about Jose Berrios or whenever that conversation is, what is behind this mystery? Because I wish I don't have an answer to that question.
I don't think anybody really has an answer to that question. We were talking before we went live about, I watched the replay of that game where he got knocked around. I mean, and they were sitting on pitches, and that might be the key there. And it's a fine line. I think when you've got a veteran pitcher, especially a high priced veteran pitcher that's got a long track record, I think it's hard for any catcher to persuade Berrios not to use certain pitches in certain situations, no matter how much you break things down, you look at tape or whatever it is, some pitchers, when they get out there, there's an arrogance about it, and I'll give a really quick story. I decided that I could walk on to a nationally ranked NAIA college baseball program. And not that I'm tall now, but I was a pretty short guy, so I threw junk. I had a knuckleball. I had one with 2 fingers, one with 3 fingers. I could do different things with it. I was known to find substances that accidentally fell on the ball that somehow made it break. So I was doing pretty well, in batting practice. I'm like, God, this is pretty good, And then I said, but I'm going to show these guys that I've got what it takes, that I can throw the heater. I can announce my presence with authority, like I said in Bull Durham. And the best hitter on my Point Park college team that I was trying to walk on and make hit a ball so hard, I swear to God, it has not come down. Everybody lost it behind the clouds. Literally, the people on the field behind me were snickering. But you know, but it pitchers have a different kind of mindset. Like, good luck telling Alek Manoah you can't throw your fastball at the letters to this hitter ever. Good luck telling him that because he's just not going to listen to you. Just like Roger Clemens didn't listen to you, Dave Steve didn't listen to you. You know, the late Bob Gibson. You know, it was when McCarver would come out and talk to him. He said the only thing you know about pitching is you can't hit it, and that's basically when you've got that kind of mentality. And I think Berrios, though he seems to be kind of low key, I think he has that mindset that I know what I can throw in this situation. He reminds me a lot of Johan Santana. He really, really does. As Santana aged, of course, they used him. Well, he pitched 150, 160 pitches in the game at some point to get his only no hitter. You know, when he's with the Mets. But I mean, he refused to give in. And that's why his numbers trailed off because he refused to admit, I'm not the guy I was at 24 now that I'm 29 or 30 or whatever. I forget how old Berrios is, but in essence, I think it's that same kind of mindset. And he's going to have a come to Jesus talk with the front office and with John Schneider and Pete Walker and Don Mattingly and say, look, if you don't, you either have to follow the game plan or we're going to call the pitches for you. I mean, I really think it's what you have to do. You really have to put him on the spot to force him to change his approach as far as using his repertoire.
That's interesting because going back to last season, Ross Atkins talked about it, and he, if you asked him, he had no idea what was going on. They've looked at they've looked at everything, they've thought about everything, and he's still getting hit hard, and that was these are the words coming out of his mouth, and so on the one hand, you say maybe there is no answer. On the other hand, though, that does sound something like a PR kind of answer when a player isn't necessarily going along with the plan. Maybe I'm not saying that is what's going on, but if I don't have any other answer, maybe that makes sense. Who knows? At this point, though, Jose Berrios, after signing that massive extension and all of that stuff, he's supposed to be playing a significant role in this rotation. And when we look at last season, he made all of his starts, which is great. I mean, we shouldn't discount a pitcher staying healthy all season. Like, let's be real, okay? Like, so there's value there. But 12-7 record, even we're talking about a guy with 12-7, and we're still saying he had a crappy season, basically. ERA of 5.23, 5.23. Yikes. So yeah, there was a lot to not like. He had a batting average on balls in play of over 328. He's getting hit, and when he gets hit, they're finding holes, I guess is what we'll say. So when you look at it, I think the numbers make it seem less ugly than the memory of it does. So when we look ahead to next season, can we even predict where Jose Berrios is going to go? Well, the projection systems have him at, winning 9, 10, 11 games, really a 500 pitcher, striking out a bit more than he did last season because he was under 8 strikeouts per 9. And an ERA of between 4.16 and 4.38. So let's start there with those just kind of general numbers that I just talked about, Steve. And is that a reasonable? And Dulcimeris picking out the really crappy ones here. His WHIP of 1.42 was icky. Icky is
Icky you. Not just icky. It was icky you. Yeah. So it's
I could not have come up with a better way to describe it. Absolutely. So, Steve, when we look at Jose Berrios's Icky U 2022 season, what can you reasonably expect in 2023? Does it like a 500 pitcher with an ERA just above 4? Is that where we are?
I think at this stage, unless he makes some kind of adjustment with his with this pitch selection. I think that's what he is now. Now, that's
Mhm.
not necessarily saying that that's not valuable to the Blue Jays. It's not what you're paying him to be. But right
Right.
now, you don't you want his innings. You don't necessarily want dazzling performance like he did when he was a Twin and when he first came over. I mean, when he came over in that trade, he was just lights out. He was
Mhm.
fantastic. So when everybody saw the deal he signed, everybody's like, "Gee, what a bargain!" And really, it was based on what his track record had been. But yeah, I think those numbers are fair. But also, Berrios is now not the 1 or 1A guy. He's the number 3 guy.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you're getting that number out of your number 3 guy in your rotation, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Rogers has money. I'm not sure that they're printing it yet. I'm sure they'll find a way, but I mean, but they're not printing it yet. So I guess they can afford, to pay that. But and the thing is, you can't move him. That
Yeah.
contract is not movable at this point. So before people start saying, well, we should trade him while you still can get some value, you needed to do that before you sign him to the extension, because you're not going to get equal value for him at this point. Even if he comes back and bites you and haunts you later, in that deal, you're not going to get, proper value. So basically, you have to make do with what you have.
Yeah.
And I think, for better or worse, that's what we have with our 3 and 4 starters, really. I mean, we already talked about Bassett in the previous one, but I mean, I think that's what we're looking at. We have guys that are just good enough and giving you enough innings that you can then mix and match with your bullpen mix and be able to get you victories. They're not going to be pretty victories, perhaps at some points, but I think that gets you some
Mhm.
victories.
Right. And when you're looking at his ERA, I mean, throughout his career, it's never been what you would call, like, 2021 was the lowest of his career, and that was a 3.5. Right. So, we're looking at 389, 384, 368, 4 in 2020, and then obviously up to 523 last season. So let's for our over and under, let's go right there and we'll look at his ERA, because traditionally his ERA hasn't exactly been, Cy Young worthy, not in the twos by any means. So let's go 2021, 352. Okay. 2022, 523. So we'll go in the middle and say 4-ish, right? So let's say 415, just for the fun of it. Steve, we'll set the over and under at 415 for Berrios ERA. Do you take the over or the under?
No, I take the over. It doesn't mean that he's not doing the job they're asking him to do, but I think his ERA is going to be closer to 4.5, I think, than anything.
Yeah. And if we've seen anything thus far over the last, year and a bit, I I don't know that there's any indication that that ERA is going back down to 3.5, right? So I'm going to take the over as well, and I think I can do that really confidently, as opposed to Springer's over and under on games played. I think I can be confident in saying the over for sure on Berrios ERA of 415. And if you download the BetStamp app, you can start betting with confidence. You can line shop, look for the best deals around in all the sports books, and you can follow winning bettors and so much more. Download the BetStamp app at the App Store or Google Play. Use the code JFTC when you do, and you can start betting like a pro. Let's move on now to Teoscar Hernandez. Erik Swanson. The the $14.5 million reliever. That's what we'll call him. No, anyway, comes over from Seattle after a great season and now finds himself, I would say, kind of, I don't want to say with more pressure, but there are expectations now on him where there may not have been previously. Not just for being traded for Teoscar Hernandez, a fan favorite, and so on and so on. As soon as he as soon as he shits the bed, the fans are going to give it to him, unfortunately. But coming in, figures to be, Steve, do you put him when we're looking at Jordan Romano, the closer, who we'll talk about in a second, and then we have already talked about Jimmy Garcia, do you put kind of Erik Swanson as a Jimmy Garcia 2.0, like next in line, or do you put him in between a Jimmy Garcia and a 40 man, or the 40 man? I was just reading a comment here. Between Jimmy Garcia and a Jordan Romano, or does it even matter?
I'm a big believer in the Andrew Miller reliever, somebody that you
Mhm.
can bring in any situation, in any inning, and it's one of the few analytical um, hypotheses that I actually agree with. That it's important to get clutch, valuable innings when you need them, not just in
Mhm.
the ninth. I mean, in some ways, I would love to see them pitch Jordan Romano in the seventh inning or the eighth inning and let somebody else close them. If you've got multiple, say you've got runners on first and second or first and third, I'd love to have Jordan Romano come in early. I mean, if
Mhm.
I was the manager of the Blue Jays, I would seriously really consider doing that. Not have just a set closer. I think Erik Swanson is perhaps more valuable than Jordan Romano to this Blue Jays team if he fulfills his potential and if he meets the expectations. I think Swanson is actually going to be more valuable than Jordan Romano because Jordan, you know what Jordan Romano is going to do at the end of a game? We don't really have anybody, and we haven't had anybody be able to come in and get leverage innings done out of the bullpen, whether it just be a couple batters, whether it be 2 innings. He's going to have that kind of flexibility. He has the stuff to come in with base people on base, come in to start an inning. For me, he is the most valuable piece of this Blue Jays bullpen. And that's why giving up Teoscar Hernandez for him, it was a no-brainer. I was
Mhm.
thrilled when it happened. Again, Teoscar, a lot of production. One thing the Blue Jays can do is they can hit.
Mhm.
They cannot pitch, especially from the bullpen. You've got players that either get overused or players that just don't fulfill the role that they're asked to do. So for me, he is the most valuable reliever.
Right. And in that, and kind of continuing on in that, in 53 and two thirds innings last season, he struck out 70 batters and collected 14 holds, which is which is great. And I think maybe to your point, I think you keep. I know you're not suggesting that he automatically replaced Jordan Romano as the closer.
But
I
no,
know
no,
you're
no.
not,
Yeah.
but if anybody has that in their mind, he did have 3 saves last season, but he also had 2 blown saves. So, but he did collect 14 holds, and we'll just point out a nice sparkling 168 ERA in the process. So, my question to you, Steve, let's go right to his excuse me, his overs and unders here. I want to look at holds. And we did this with Jimmy Garcia, who I believe had 22, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and check. But Erik Swanson had 14. And my question now to you, Steve, is do you see the over or the under of 14 holds for Erik Swanson next season?
Oh, way over. Way, way, way over.
Hmm.
I mean, holds are a tricky category for me. I value holds almost more than I value saves. I mean, if you've got a guy that can strike out at the rate he can and can shut down any potential rallies or not to cough up a lead, I think that's as valuable as your guy pitching the ninth inning. So I'm going way over on the 14. I might even, though I don't know they'll use them that much. I'd even go to double it. I mean, I'd even say the ceiling is 28.
Interesting. Interesting. It would be, that would be an interesting kind of scenario, right? Given that, like, when we saw back in way back in the day, even back to the 92, 93 World Series championships, they had very defined roles, the Dwayne Ward, the Tom Hankies, and so on. And they would almost have to do that, right, to pick up the hold and the save stats, because they like, you're not going to pick up a hold in the sixth or seventh inning, and if we have somebody coming in just for leverage situations, you're not going to pick up a hold then. So It would be interesting. I'm going to take the over. I agree that I think he will be used in that situation because how can you not? So I'm gonna take the over. I don't know that it's going to be quite as over as you just said, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm still thinking it's the over. He gets used in that situation, the bridge to Romano, because him and Jimmy Garcia and Jordan Romano in the back end of that bullpen looks very, very sexy to me. So anyway, I'll take the over, and I'm going to remind everybody to download the BetStamp app at the App Store or Google Play. Use the code JFTC when you do. You can line shop, you can follow winning bettors, and you can do so much more. Download the BetStamp app today and start betting like a pro.
Yeah, just to clarify though, you can get a hold, and I think even in the fifth inning, you can actually. I mean, if your starter doesn't quite get there, and your team is still ahead when the starter comes out, you can still qualify for a hold for I think as early as the fifth inning. But I know from the sixth inning on, you can qualify for a hold. You can only have to face one batter, and you still qualify for the hold if the run was not surrendered. So that's where by using him in that Andrew Miller kind of a role,
Mm-hmm.
or even um, back, in the days, you had guys that would go multiple innings. That's where the holds are going to come in play for him.
Right, right. Interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how he gets used, right? Because last year it was kind of almost Jimmy Garcia, Jordan Romano. Those are the two guys, and then everybody else kind of did what they could when they could. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets used. But we're going to move into our final projection, and we just talked about him actually, and that is Canada's own Jordan Romano. And Steve, first of all, not playing in the WBC, which is fine. My question to you is last season, the 29-year-old closer collected 36 saves, excuse me, 36 saves in 64 innings to a 2.11 ERA. A very similar season to the previous year. One would argue even better. So my question to you, Steve, is do you see him continuing this trend of being a 30 plus save closer? Because really, when you look across Major League Baseball, how for how long can a closer maintain their status as a closer with consistency? Craig Kimball's had problems, and Kenley Jansen has had problems, and so on and so on and so on. So I guess the question is, do you see him continuing this I don't want to call it dominance, but let's go with that word.
I do think that. I mean, there's a reason that the Kimbrels and the Jansons and those type of relievers struggle. The thing to shine a brighter light on his 36 saves is that the Blue Jays, with their offensive propensities, are often in games where there's not a save situation. It doesn't mean Romano doesn't come in and get the last couple outs or whatever it is. So to get 36 saves for a team that, for the most part, is generously outscoring, their opponents, I think that shows you how clutch he is. So when he's given those opportunities to earn that save, that's great. It's a shame. How many games finished? Did you have that in front of you? How many games finished he had last year?
I don't know that Fangraphs has it. Let me pull up
Of course not, because
the
it's a
other
real baseball stat. So they're not going to have
baseball
games
reference.
finished. No, let's not waste our listeners' time. But I mean, I would imagine that his game finishes would have to be up in the mid to upper 50s, if not 60s. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me because, again, he pitched a lot of games where the Blue Jays were comfortably ahead, but maybe some of those relievers were just struggling a little bit. So rather than cough up the lead, you bring in Jordan Romano because he's as reliable and as much of a sure thing as you're going to find.
Mhm.
Certainly, I would say in the American League, I can't think of a whole lot of other quote unquote closers that I would want to go to and feel good about going to that pitcher. Class A
Right.
in Cleveland, maybe, but I think that's about
Mhm.
it.
Right. So, in In 64 innings, he picked up 36 saves, and he finished 52 games
That's lower than I
last season.
thought. Yeah, that's surprising. I mean, it just seemed that he pitched a lot. And maybe it's just
Mhm.
me, but it just seemed like he pitched more than that. But
Yeah, I'm actually more surprised about the multiple innings. 64 innings in 63 games. I guess it's not multiple innings when you think about it, but you're right. There were a lot of times where he was used in non-save situations. It is what it is, and he only blew 6 saves, by the way, in case anybody was wondering. So,
and
Steve,
MLB
let's
Network for some reason shows every single one of them when they're
of
highlighting
course,
a judge homer or somebody else homers in a clutch time. Somehow it's
yeah.
Jordan Romano on the mound. I'm like,
Mm,
I mean, it can't. How could you? How can that possibly be? It's
yeah,
impossible. You've got all these home runs, and you got to pick every one that Jordan Romano gave up. Come on.
of course, of course. It's just coincidental, Steve.
Yes.
Just coincidental, of course. um, but for the record, he only gave up 4 home runs last season, so they must have shown all of them. So my question to you, Steve, let's go right to his over and under. Let's look at, rather than looking at saves. Actually, no. You know what? Let's look at saves, because, in theory, when you look at it, the Toronto Blue Jays on paper are a better team, a more balanced team. They should, in theory, be in more games, and they should win more games potentially. So my question is, at 30 saves, do you take the over or the under for Jordan Romano at 30 saves? Because the previous season in 2021, it was only 23. So that's why I hesitate to not go, 40 or 50, but
Right.
30 saves.
I'm gonna go over. I'd even maybe go as high as 40
Hmm.
because in theory, with Garcia, with Swanson, with some of the other upgrades, or I shouldn't even say upgrades, but players being put into roles that they're better suited for, I think that allows John Schneider to wait until the ninth inning to use Romano. I think there's more options bridging to get to Romano. So I think they can utilize him more effectively. So from a really usage stat situation, I'd say he goes over 30.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not like they're the Tampa Bay Rays, who you can, if you're playing fantasy baseball and you're looking for saves, you don't go for a Tampa Bay Rays reliever, because there's no guarantee that they're going to collect the number of saves you're hoping for, right? But I think with the Blue Jays, I think that's a different situation. They're built differently, so I think that I will take the over as well. I think, first of all, they're going to win more games. I think they're going to be in more games, and as you said, they have other weapons that they can use and save that Jordan Romano closing situation. So I'm going to go ahead and take the over on that as well. And I'm also going to remind everybody, download the BetStamp app on the App Store or Google Play. Use the code JFTC, and you can start betting like a pro by line shopping and following other winning bettors. It really is a great tool if you want to take your game to the next level. So download the app today, use the code JFTC, and start betting like a pro. All right, Steve, you know what time it is. We got through our projections rather quickly-ish, and that brings us to everybody's favorite moment, fake Blue Jays news. Now, before we dive right into that, I want to take a moment to remind everybody that this is for pure entertainment purposes. This is not real. That's why we call it fake Blue Jays news. It's just some stuff to wrap up every episode and put a smile on your face, hopefully. So, with that,
Though they do have some strings of truth through the stories. It's just
sure,
our
sure.
our way of being mean with saying like we're just joking around. Yeah. So,
Or funny with
yeah.
trying to be funny, but it comes across mean. But anyway, we'll see. All right, so without further ado, Jays from the Couch proudly presents fake Blue Jays news. With the news that the Blue Jays will be honoring Jose Bautista in the level of excellence, it is interesting to note that other featured levels of recognition. The Blue Jays will complement the level of excellence with an area recognizing those players who grabbed our attention and did nothing with it. The level of broken dreams will recognize such Blue Jays greats as Brett Laurie, Travis Snyder, And, of course, Erik Hinske, who disappeared after winning the Rookie of the Year award. Ross Atkins says it's still too soon to know if Nate Pearson will find his place there, but the sign is getting ready just in case. As well, Jace from the Couch has learned that honored guests at Bautista's ceremony will be former Texas Ranger pitcher Cole Hamels and Sam Dyson. Rougned Odor would be on the list, but he's still trying to find the top 2 buttons of his jersey as well as a batting average. But don't worry, that guy is good at getting you when you don't expect it, and he'll arrange a sucker appearance out of nowhere. Speaking of Odor, this podcast marks the first time anyone has ever spoken about him in years. On behalf of everyone at Jays from the Couch, I say to Rougned Odor, you're welcome. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Shaun. The Blue Jays announced 2 late additions to the promotional schedule. Monday, June 5th, Toronto opens a big 4-game series against the defending World Series champion Houston Astros. All fans will receive a replica Blue Jays moving van sponsored by Toronto Prue Movers. The truck will feature new Vice President of Baseball Strategy James Click, the architect of the Astros World Series championship. He'll be in the driver's seat with the World Series trophy strapped into the passenger seat beside him. It also comes with a pair of mover figurines that look suspiciously like Thomas Hatch and Ross Atkins. Starting with the home opener April 11th versus the Tigers, special Jays Care 50/50 jackpot tickets will be available. The limited edition tickets are a bit pricey at $100 a pop, but they will serve as a win-win payoff for Jays fans everywhere. The tickets will be scratch-offs and will feature a number from 330 to 1001. These numbers represent the date on the calendar the front office realizes the mistake it made and the date Brandon Belt will be either traded or released. Back to you, Shaun.
Oh, man. When you said Brandon, I thought you were going to say Drury, and I was getting ready to end the show right now.
I'm shocked you didn't put him in. I'm shocked you didn't put him in the level of mediocrity.
Broken Dreams?
Broken Dreams, yeah.
No, I was going to go with a bottom level that goes right along the base of the wall, all around the outfield, and plays Brandon Drury gets a place there. Brad Fulmer, he gets his name there. Jose Canseco, he gets his name there. But instead, I decided that would be a little too mean, so I I held back on that one. But if Brandon Drury hits another 30 home runs, guess what? He's going on there. Anyway, that brings us to the end of episode 324 of the Jays from the Couch Radio podcast. Thank you so much for everybody. The conversation on the YouTube channel I was going fast and furious. I was trying to watch that and pay attention and then as well do the show. So thank you to Mark Ryan over on YouTube, New Brunswick, Canada guy, Dulcimeris, and everybody else who's watching at home on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much. And remember, add your comments and your questions and we'll put them right up here on the screen, and you too can be part of the show. And of course, I want to thank Steve for not going to Florida and joining me tonight for this episode, because I don't work well alone. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
I was happy to be here. Again, we miss you, Karen, but it'll be fun to see your show on Thursday from Dunedin. Is she doing it from the stadium or the complex? Do you know? Or
she has not decided on, or at least told me what her undisclosed location is. But she's definitely in Florida somewhere. She's been at a game nonstop and making me jealous along the way. But she will have a great show from spring training on Thursday, to be sure. So don't forget, tune into that. And of course, the On Feck Circle tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. So thank you to everybody from the bottom of my heart. Steve, thank you for joining me. So for Steve, for Karen off in Florida, and her husband, Ron, having a great time down in Florida, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFTC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.